During the Six Flags Q3 2020 earnings call, the theme park chain shared that they will be eliminating 15 underperforming rides across their parks. It was shared that park presidents, engineers, and maintenance teams analyzed the operational costs and reliability of each ride versus its throughput. After a bad 2020 season due to the pandemic, it's clear that Six Flags wants to trim operational expenses on some of their less popular or less reliable rides. Ultimately, the intention is to free up cash for new CapEx resources or redeploy less popular attractions at other parks as economical new additions. There, they would gain a newfound audience. In this video, I will predict the 15 rides and attractions I suspect Six Flags will remove. Since Six Flags has 15 amusement parks in North America, I will assume each park had to nominate one ride for removal. This may or may not actually be the case, but that's the assumption I'm making for this video. Starting with Six Flags New England and Massachusetts, there are several candidates that I think could be removed. The most obvious one is Goliath, the Vekoma giant inverted boomerang that rarely runs. The ride has a ton of maintenance issues, and it can't run when the temperature gets below 60 degrees or if it rains. And the latter two conditions happen quite a bit in New England. Flashback is the old Vekoma boomerang, and that one's a bit redundant with Goliath there. The park also has another redundant ride in Tomahawk, the smaller frisbee, that became redundant once the Harley Quinn supersized Discovery was added. Another ride that has a lot of downtime at this park is the Typhoon water coaster, but I can't quite see that one being removed yet. My guess for Six Flags New England is that Goliath will finally bite the dust, considering how rarely it runs, and guest satisfaction with that ride is not the best. Moving on to Great Escape in Lake George, New York, there are several candidates that I can see for the flat rides. You have Flying Trapeze, the yo-yo that rarely runs, and you also have Condor, one of the last Husk Condors, and that's another ride that I don't see running very often when I go to the park. But the number one candidate for me is the Alpine Bobsled, the rare Intamin bobsled. This ride is usually closed, and park employees have admitted that even if the ride is running, they list it as closed in the app just so people don't expect it to run and find it closed. The ride also can't run precipitation, and it can't run after 6 due to noise. That is why I'm guessing the Alpine Bobsled will be removed, and that will free up a lot of space for this park to add something in the future. Moving further north into New York, you have Six Flags Darien Lake. There are 2 coasters I could see possibly getting removed, but I don't quite see that happening yet. You have Predator, the old wooden coaster that's disliked and probably requires quite a bit of track work. And then you also have Viper, the old Arrow Looper. But I think both those rides will stay for now. The ride that I'm going to predict will be leaving is Silver Bullet, the only enterprise ever made by Heinz Fanse. Moving to Ronde in Canada, you have a few coasters that I could see possibly going. The most notable would be Monster, considering that ride hasn't run as often in recent years, and it probably requires quite a bit of track work to keep going. Another candidate would be Manitou, the redundant frisbee after Titan was added. However, there are 2 observation rides that I think are the most likely candidates. The first is Mini Rail, the old monorail that runs around the perimeter of the park, and that ride actually didn't run last year. But the one that I think is the most likely candidate is Spiral, the giant observation tower that hasn't run since 2018. Moving on to Six Flags Great Adventure in New Jersey, I don't think any coasters are on the chopping block, but I will say that Bizarro would make a standout addition for a smaller Six Flags park, whereas at Great Adventure, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I think a non-coaster is the most likely ride removal of this park. Some candidates are Sawmill Plunge, the old log flume, Twister, the last US top spin. However, because Six Flags closed all their other top spins in their chain, I think this park got all the old used parts, so Six Flags should have enough to keep this ride going for a while. Cyborg is a new ride that the park added, but this tourbillon is often broken. But the ride I think is most likely to go would be the Edwards Air Force Base Parachute Tower. For one, the ride's really old. 2, the ride does require quite a few employees if they want to run at max capacity. Moving further down south to Maryland, you have Six Flags America. The park does have 2 water rides that I could possibly see being removed in their Shoot the Chutes and the Penguins Blizzard River, but I think the most likely candidate is Batwing, one of 2 remaining Vekoma Flying Dutchmen. This ride isn't supported anymore from Vekoma. It often opens late when I visit the park, if it even opens, and it has a really low capacity. I think this ride could be biting the dust. Moving to Six Flags Over Georgia near Atlanta, I don't think any coasters are in danger. And it took me a while to find a ride that stood out, but I think their most likely candidate would be the Log Jamboree, their old era log flume. Six Flags has removed some of their older log flumes in the past few years, and this ride isn't quite a standout anymore for this park. Plus, they still have the River Rapids ride to give the park guests a water ride. Moving to Six Flags Great America near Chicago, Illinois, you have several older flat rides that I think would be good candidates for removal. However, you also have several older coasters. American Eagle has two sides and probably requires quite a bit of track work to keep going, but I think that will eventually be an RMC candidate, but that's not the next ride they'll remove. Wizard was also on the chopping block for a while, but I think that ride's safe. Demon is an old era looper, but I also think that ride is safe for now. I actually think the ride that Six Flags Great America is going to remove is not because the ride is at the end of its service life. Rather, I think it's because it's a prime relocation candidate. And that ride would be Vertical Velocity. The ride can't be cheap to operate with those LIMs, and it would be a standout attraction at other Six Flags parks, whereas at Six Flags Great America, it doesn't quite stand out anymore, especially with Max Force giving the park a more forceful launch coaster. And you also have Batman for an inverted coaster. Moving to Six Flags St. Louis, one of the rides that I thought might possibly be on the chopping block would be Mr. Freeze. The ride does have a lot of downtime, and it's probably expensive to run with those LIMs, but it's probably the park's signature steel coaster, so I think it's safe. Excalibur is another candidate I thought about, because it's a really rare ride model. However, it was recently refurbished, so I don't think they'd remove it. Superman Tower of Power is a ride that stood out to me because it's often running at less than full capacity because one or two sides are broken. But, like Six Flags Over Georgia, I think the most likely ride removal candidate is the Old Arrow Log Flume. Just because of how those water rides tend to take quite a bit of money to keep going, quite a bit of staffing to run, and Six Flags has removed several of these rides over the past few years. Moving to Frontier City in Oklahoma City, one of the rides that stood out to me was Diamondback, because that ride seems to be down more than any of their other roller coasters. However, this Arrow-launched loop did just get a new covered queue line, so I don't think it's going to be removed. The ride that I think they're going to remove might be a little cheating for me to say this, but I'll say Tumbleweed, their Chance Rotor. This ride was closed for 2020, and Six Flags has removed all their rotors in the parks that they've owned. This is a relatively rare remaining ride model, and because it was closed for 2020 and converted into a masked breathing zone, I think this ride's days are numbered. Moving to Six Flags Over Texas, the same thoughts can be said about their Mr. Freeze as the one at Six Flags St. Louis, except at Six Flags Over Texas, it's not the premier steel coaster there. However, I think the ride's still popular enough that they won't remove it. One of the rides that stood out to me, just like Six Flags Great Adventure, is Harley Quinn Spinsanity, because this tourbillon is often closed, but considering it's new, I think they'll give it a chance to keep going. Where I think the most likely ride removal candidate comes from the Mexico or Spain area, where there are a lot of older rides. You have La Vibora, an Intamin bobsled that's a rare ride, and it's probably the worst capacity ride in the park. However, I think you'll probably be removing either El Asadero, the first log flume, or Sombrero, the old Chance Trabant. I would like to think that Six Flags Over Texas would be nostalgic for the original log flume, so I'd like to think El Asadero is safe. For that reason, I'm going to predict Sombrero will be removed and replaced with another flat ride. Moving to Six Flags Fiesta Texas near San Antonio, I had struggled to think of a good candidate for this park to remove, but I did eventually see Hustler, the rare Morgan spinning teacup ride, considering that ride was on the chopping block in the past. Moving to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom, the ride that stood out to me was Harley Quinn Crazy Coaster. While it's a relatively new ride, that ride is usually closed and it's not liked by guests. The other rides that I could possibly see being removed would be Flash Vertical Velocity, because it also was closed a lot. However, it was recently renamed and repainted, so I don't think they're ready to remove it. Another ride I could see possibly getting removed would be Tasmanian Devil, the smaller Huss Frisbee, because they just added Wonder Woman in recent years, as that ride would become redundant. However, I still am going with Harley Quinn as the ride removal. Moving to Six Flags Magic Mountain, this is another one that's pretty obvious. It's going to be Tidal Wave. It needs to be removed for the leaked Raptor to work. Some of the older rides that could eventually be on the chopping block after this would be Jetstream, the old Arrow Log Flume, Viper, the old Arrow Looper, Ninja, one of the last remaining Arrow suspended coasters, and Superman because it's costly to run and often closed, but that's another ride that recently got parts, so I don't think it's going to be removed anytime soon. Last but not least, you have Six Flags Mexico, and I saw 2 rides I think could get removed. One was Roulette, the old Chance Trabant, but the one that I think is more likely is Aquaman Splashdown. A lot of Six Flags parks have removed their Shoot the Chutes rides, and Six Flags Mexico still has a River Rapids ride to give the park guests a water attraction in the summer. So those are my predictions for the rides that I think Six Flags could remove. Again, this is all speculation, but this is my best guess. In summary, I have 14 rides being removed for good, and only 1 being relocated in the chain. What are your thoughts on the rides and attractions Six Flags could remove or redeploy? I would love to hear predictions down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate if you gave it a like and considered subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.